Good morning. My name is Charlotte McGee Mickle, and I am the Tribal Council Secretary, and one of my responsibilities is to chair the Records Committee for the Office of Archives and Records Management. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our annual records training. My hope is that each of you will realize the importance of updating and maintaining your office files. If it wasn't for good records keeping, it could have been very time-consuming for the Poarch Creek Indians to obtain federal recognition back in the 80s. You may think, oh, that's just a sheet of paper with some notes, or maybe you think that file is no longer of importance to your office. But years to come, you may look back and realize that sheet of paper or that file folder will play an important part in the history of the Poarch Creek Indians. The records management team looks forward to sharing valuable insight with you on how we can effectively manage and preserve our important records together. In closing, I'd like to say a valuable part of this training is to remember no records can be destroyed without my prior authorization. Thank you for listening and enjoy your training.
Welcome to the Records Management Training presented by the Office of Archives and Records Management team. Everything we do is based on the Tribal Records Management Ordinance that you see pictured here. It is a 16-page document that can be found on MuniCode. If you are wondering why you are listening to this training, it's important to know that all employees of the Poarch Creek Indians are legally required to comply with the Tribal Records Management Ordinance. So let's get started.
Here's a brief overview of the services we offer for PCI department and entities. We are a repository for all tribal records. If you have some department records that you would like to send to archives, you can do a records move request. More about this later.
We also offer digitization. We love when donors bring in old photographs to add to our archival collection.
To ensure we keep all records safe, we apply the freezer and smother treatment method to all incoming records. We will show a little more detail on this soon.
Also, we oversee the confidential shredding service for all tribal departments. In this training, you will learn about the proper records management procedures to follow for a records move request and a request for destruction of records. But first, we will explain a little more about what we do as the Archives Department.
Our focus at the Office of Archives and Records Management is to protect our treasured archival collections for generations to come. However, over time, the everyday or mundane things in life that we do on a regular basis change as a culture and society over time. So while the Rolands and Miss Florence you see pictured here may not have thought much about their photo being taken, sitting around the porch shelling peas, we treasure photos like this today as it shows how much has changed over time and what a treasure it is to look back on our loved ones and how they lived their everyday lives. We are glad to have photos like this in our archival collection. However, we only have what is donated to us. If you have any photos, videos, or anything from any tribal events from your department, no matter how insignificant or minor it may seem today, please pass them along to donate to the archives. We only have what is given to us.
It is important to be aware of threats to records, even if your office is located in a new building. There are some bugs that like to eat paper and ink. Pictured here is a real-life example of a particular bug known as a silverfish that was attacking some tribal records. Here is a closer look at a silverfish and also some damage by a firebrat bug. If you see any bugs on your records, call the archives team immediately. We will be sure to treat the records appropriately so that no further damage can be done and tribal records can be preserved properly.
Ow! I feel good. I knew that I would once I got your records.
There are also threats to records that are outside of our control, such as a natural disaster weather event. The sooner we know about an event, the better we can prepare, as it is better to be proactive. However, in instances where preparation in advance is not an option, we can do damage repair afterwards to do the best of our ability.
Here is one of the most important things to note as an employee. The time most records are lost is during a move. If your office is relocating, remember that all records are tribal property and must still follow the Tribal Records Management Ordinance. As an employee, you are responsible for abiding by this law, so be sure not to throw records away out of convenience. They must still follow the records retention schedule, which we will go into more detail on a little later.
Here is an example of a record that was unfortunately damaged by fire. It's a handwritten letter by Chief Calvin McGee. Although we do not have the entire document, it is still precious to have this piece of the handwritten letter in the archives. If you have a damaged record of historical significance to the tribe, please bring it in, and the archives team will do our best to restore it as much as possible.
Keeping media and documents safe and secure is of the utmost importance to our team at the Office of Archives and Records Management. Here are some ways that we ensure safety of records for the long haul. Every record is placed in an archival box that is then placed into a thick plastic bag before it comes into our building. This step is a precaution ensures that we do not introduce any pesky critters to our collections that are already in our care. Once the collection is bagged, we put it through the freezer treatment method for a week. The freezer is set to -80 degrees to ensure that any bugs, eggs, or mold does not survive to infect any other records. If a collection has media such as discs, hard drive, or anything too fragile to withstand the harsh temperature of the freezer treatment method, we treat it with the smother treatment method, which places the collection in an environment that removes oxygen to ensure that anything that might not be visible to the naked eye that may be on the record will die due to lack of oxygen. Once the records have completed the treatment process, they are placed in the forever home for safekeeping. Permanent records will be placed in a Fire King file cabinet which can withstand fire for over 2 hours and are also water resistant. So you can trust that your records are safe with the Office of Archives and Records Management team.
So you may be asking yourself, how long do I have to keep a record? That's a great question, as each record is different and therefore has its own unique timeline to follow. It is important to know the difference between a permanent and temporary record, and the way to know the answer to this is to refer to the records retention schedule, which will look a little something like this. A records retention schedule tells you the life cycle of the record, answering the question of how long you are required to keep a record.
It is important to note that all employees are responsible for abiding by the records retention schedule. This is a law set in the Tribal Records Management Ordinance. It is actually a felony to throw away, discard, or delete tribal records without following the proper process.
This law applies to both digital and physical records. Records retention schedules are updated on a biannual basis.
It is the responsibility of each department to review and update their records retention schedule. Department directors should contact the records manager at the Office of Archives and Records Management with any edit requests, especially if a new type of record needs to be added to the retention schedule. Updates to the records retention schedules must be approved by the Records Committee.
Now that you know the difference between permanent and temporary records and how long to keep a record based on the records retention schedule, let's talk about the difference between original and duplicate records. A duplicate record is simply a copy. This means that you know the original record still exists somewhere. In today's world, many of our records are born digital. Therefore, you can consider the original record the digital record and the printed version a copy. If you have any copies of records containing confidential information, you can use the locked shredded bins to dispose of them. Shredded comes on a regular monthly basis and is for copies only. If you have an original record that has come to the end of its life cycle, it must follow the request for destruction of records process. More on that later.
Here are the 5 simple steps to complete a records move request. First, you will need to fill out the inventory sheet completely.
Arrange records in chronological order and place in an archivable grade box provided by our team according to date of destruction.
Then place a printed copy of the inventory sheet inside the box with the corresponding records.
Label the box according to the provided guidelines.
Last step, email the digital file of all inventories to archivesinfo@pci-nsn.gov.
And remember, we are here to help you along the way. Following these steps ensures a smooth process of records transfer between departments. Please note that records will not be accepted to the archives without following this procedure. Also, a completed inventory and labeled box helps us fulfill your records requested quicker. So this step is crucial for your department's benefit as well as the archives team to provide more efficient service. For the next few slides, we'll walk through the steps of properly filling out the inventory form. There are some new changes, so please pay attention.
Yes, ma'am.
In column 1, labeled Records Manager, this is where you will put the name of the employee responsible for the record. Here's an example. Jane Doe assigns Joe Deere to send records to the archives. Even though Joe is assigned to do this, they are still Jane's records. So Jane's name will go in this column as the records manager since they are Jane's records. The record series / description column is simply where you list what the record is, the title of the record. It is helpful here to list keywords, so think about when you are searching for a particular record, what would you call it? This is what you will type here. The begin date column refers to the very first record in the series. If there is only one record, use the date of that record. The end date column refers to the last record in the series. If there is only one record, the begin and end date will be the same. On our example here, you can see that this record series is for 2020 invoices. This means they are all the same type of record, invoices. They have different dates, but they are all within the same year and the same type of record. This is why you can list this record series on the same line. If you have an invoice, however, that is dated for 2021, that will have to go on a separate line. For our example, we'll focus on the 2020 series of invoices. They are all the same type of record throughout the year of 2020. In the retention period column, you will list the retention period found on the record's retention schedule. If the record is considered permanent, the retention schedule will show that. In the date of destruction column, you will take the end date and add the retention period to get the date that the records can be destroyed. In our example, the most recent 2020 invoices are dated for December 31st, 2020, with a retention period of 5 years. So when we add 5 years to the listed end date, we get December 31, 2025. This means that all records in this series can be destroyed on December 31, 2025, as they have fulfilled their retention period. In this column, you will list whether your record is paper or a type of media, such as a CD, DVD, USB, hard drive, or anything in a glass frame, such as an award, plaque, etc. This is important for us to know so that the box of records gets treated properly when we receive it at our office. In the final column, you will identify whether the record is confidential or not by simply placing a capital Y for yes, confidential, or a capital N for not confidential. It is crucial to have this information filled out completely on the inventory form. After all, as the originators of the records, you know more about your own records than anyone else, and therefore can share the most information to ensure your records are kept in the best orderly fashion.
Here is a real-life example of what your collection will look like after following the proper records management steps. Another reason it is so important to have completed inventory forms and properly labeled boxes is because we are an archival repository for the whole tribe, with over 2,000 cubic feet of just permanent records. This does not include the thousands of boxes of temporary records we also store, partially pictured here on the bottom left. While it may be tempting to just throw an old record away out of convenience, you must remember that every record generated belongs to the tribe, even if you generated the record. It is not your own property to do as you please at your own discretion. Pursuant to the Tribal Records Ordinance, the Tribal Council Secretary, who serves as Records Committee Chair, has sole authority over the destruction of tribal records.
On the screen, you will see the steps of a proper request for destruction of records that all original records must follow once they reach the end of their life cycle. If you have already done a records move request to let your records reach the end of their life cycle at the Office of Archives and Records Management, we will take care of the request for destruction of records. If you choose to house your records in your office until they reach the end of their life cycle, contact the Office of Archives and Records Management team for a request for destruction of records once your original records reach the end of their life cycle. As always, the Archives and Records Management team is here to help you with all of these processes. Woohoo! You made it to the end of the training! Here are a few key points to remember. Always abide by the records retention schedule, and remember the laws are the same for digital and physical records.
Records will not be accepted into Office of Archives Records Management without a proper inventory and labeled archival grade box provided to you by the Office of Archives and Records Management staff.
Remember, every record generated belongs to the tribe.
Shredded bins should remain locked at all times to ensure confidentiality is being kept safe and secure. And also remember that shredded bins are for copies only. Original records must go through the request for destruction of records process.
Make a regular habit of sending media such as photos and videos to archives for safekeeping for the tribe.
Remember, records management is the responsibility of all employees of the Poarch Creek Indians. If you have any questions at all, contact the Office of Archives and Records Management at extension 2962 or archivesinfo@pci-nsn.gov, and we will be happy to help with all of your archival and records management needs. Thank you for listening to the Records Management Training presented by the Poarch Creek Indians Office of Archives and Records Management team. We hope you learned some valuable information, and we look forward to helping you with all of your records requests and hopefully receiving your donations to enhance our archival collections for future generations to enjoy.